Joining us today on What the Heck is Happening in HR is Bill Carter. Bill Carter is an experienced HR professional with more than 27 years of expertise. He is also the visionary co founder of AiOnix. He's deeply committed to leveraging technology to simplify HR processes and empower HR professionals to take a more strategic approach within their organizations. With his diverse background in strategic HR roles across Europe and the US, he brings a wealth of knowledge and a unique perspective on how AI technology can be utilized to increase employee engagement, productivity, and organizational effectiveness. His pioneering efforts with AiOnix are focused on preparing workforces for the future of work, fostering environments where technology and human insight work together to drive unprecedented growth. You can find out more information on AiOnix at aionix.ai/contact. Bill's LinkedIn profile is very active, and he has a wonderful group on LinkedIn called AI and Technology in Human Resources. I suggest you connect up with Bill on LinkedIn and you join his group on LinkedIn. And thanks so much for joining us today, Bill. For our podcast disclaimer, please visit the episode description. Thanks so much for coming back to What the Heck is Happening in HR. And if there's anything that's really happening in HR, it is artificial intelligence. And today I've got with me AiOnix guru Bill Carter. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, so let's just talk about what is AI. Just define it and how are we exposed to it?
Mhm. So, AI, artificial intelligence, there's lots of different types of AI, and we've been using AI, believe it or not, since the 50s.
Yeah.
But the recent trend towards AI is something called large language models, and they are a little bit different from what we've had before. And not going to get technical. I'm just going to keep it high level for the listeners. But basically, they have taken an awful lot of information and put a engine into it, which can look through that information and draw conclusions. That's at its most basic level. And then did you ask how we're using it in
Yeah,
HR at the moment?
I think we use it every day before we get into HR. I think we
Mhm.
use it every day and don't even realize that we're
Sure. I
using
mean,
AI,
if you
right?
have yeah, absolutely. If you have a car that's able to do something called adaptive cruise control, so it keeps the distance between the car in front and you, that's using a form of AI. If you have an Alexa or a Google Home in your house, then you're using AI already.
Yeah, and even Netflix, right? When it suggests
Mhm.
the next thing to watch.
Absolutely.
That's the same
Yeah.
sort of thing. So we've become used to it, but didn't even realize it. So one of the things I'd like you to explain is this open source AI and what that means for HR and how HR uses AI.
Well, let me just talk just really quickly before we get into that. Let me just talk really quickly about the types of AI that are already being
Okay, great.
used in some HR departments. And largely that's to do with the applicant tracking systems. So there's a lot of AI starting to come out in the applicant tracking systems, which allows people to find people's resumes quickly and easily. So the AI will sift through a huge number of resumes looking for specific things and then come back to the people and say, hey, these are the people who might be suitable. Now, traditionally, up until recently, those have been based on almost like a search model. So it searches for keywords.
Mm-hmm.
But the newer forms of that are actually looking and putting some sort of intelligence around it, saying, okay, keywords are here, but in what context?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it's already kind of in HR departments. There's way more that's going to come, and it's way more exciting than just that. That's kind of just the brief introduction to it.
So what's coming? I mean, you can't just say that and leave us hanging.
Oh, it's so difficult to know where to start. It's such a big thing that can, I mean, it's funny because I've said to people before about AI coming, and it's a lot of people don't realize what's coming down the track for them, and I see a look of horror in HR people's eyes when I say that, and in their heads, it's almost like the meme from the films where the person is tied to the train tracks and this train is coming, and you're getting tense back in the old '50s films that the train's going to run over them, and actually that's not really what it is. It's much more like, imagine this, you were standing at King's Cross Station on platform 9 3/4, and the magical train Hogwarts Express is coming to take you away to some incredible adventures. That's more like this. So when I say they don't know what's coming down the tracks for them, it's not a negative thing, it's a positive thing. AI will be able to help us in so many ways and free up so much time and allow us to concentrate on what we in HR really want to get out of it, which is to be more strategic and spend more time with people.
Hmm. I was speaking with an attorney recently about AI and their use of it, and she
Mhm,
shared that she wrote this email and she was
mhm,
really ticked off
mhm.
at the email she received. And she said, I
Yep.
wrote this email I didn't want to send, but I just was furious. And so I turned it over to AI to rewrite
Mhm,
it in a friendlier tone, and it did.
yep.
And
Yep.
so she uses it that way, but doesn't include any client information. Can you talk about the
Sure.
open sourceness, if you will, if
Sure.
that's a word,
Yeah.
of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a small caveat with the tools that are largely available nowadays for people to just go in and use. And we'll take ChatGPT as an example, and there are many others. There's Gemini and Copilot, which is based on ChatGPT. But anyhow, one of the things you have to be really careful of in HR is that whenever you upload documents into the general sort of versions of these, there are some corporate ones that this is a little bit different for. But when you upload information into those general ones, that information becomes the property of those companies. So in the case of ChatGPT, OpenAI then is the owner of that data that you've put in there, and they use it to train the models. So just think about how much confidential information we in HR have access to.
Mm.
If that were to get into the public domain, some of that stuff could be a real problem, especially if you think about this, if you're in the healthcare profession and let's say you were to upload some patient data, thinking it's okay, it's on my computer, it's not a problem.
Hmm.
Suddenly that patient data is available to everyone potentially, and that could be a HIPAA violation. In the European Union, it could be a
Privacy.
data privacy regulation
Hmm.
violation.
Wow.
So you do have to be careful, but there are ways of using AI that do protect you against those sort of things.
Right. And
Can I just say one thing
please.
about your lawyer's technique? I think that's fantastic, and our traditional advice to people when they receive an email that upsets them is write your response, but don't send it. Wait till overnight or you've gone away and had a think, come back, reread it with a cool head, and
Hmm.
then send it. But your lawyer friends hit on something great because you don't have to do that anymore. You can
Hmm.
go into AI and you can say, hey, what's the best way of responding to this email? And you don't even really have to write the response yourself if you don't want to. You can tell AI what you would like in there and then say, and I want this in a friendly and professional response. Or even go so far as to say, "Hey, I want you to make sure that this doesn't push any buttons on the next, to my recipient,"
Hmm.
and it will do its best. Now, you can't guarantee it's gonna work, but it will for sure do its best to try and come up with something that's diplomatic.
Hmm. Whenever I've written an email like that to send the next day, I forget about it. It's sitting in my
Mhm.
drafts, and then I
Yeah,
tick
that's
the
right.
person off even
and then
more because I didn't
then you get a
reply.
yeah, then you get a slutty email back saying, why didn't you respond to my email?
Exactly. You opened it. What's the matter with you? Right.
Exactly,
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
So, so if I were to do an offer letter, let's say in OpenAI, and I
Mhm.
were to say, do this offer letter to this engineer at this salary,
Yeah.
then that becomes their property. If I were to then say, do an offer, if I were another time be able to say, do an offer letter to an
Mhm.
engineer and give me the salary range, would it pull the data that it's received from other offer letters or other surveys or whatever other computers it's worked with?
So if we're talking in the large language models like
Mhm.
ChatGPT, um, you could what I would suggest is yes, you could write a letter for me, but first thing I'd want to do was separate the two things. So can you give me a general salary range for let's say a sound engineer in the Tampa Bay area, let's say.
Mhm.
And then it would look. But remember that the data for, especially for ChatGPT, is not up to date.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure exactly where it is at the moment. It was November of 2021. I think it's moved forward a little bit now. But it's not up to date. Now, if you have one of the higher paid ones, it will then attempt to go out to the internet. But it's struggling now to scrape sort of sites that are that you have to pay for. So the data may be of less value. I don't think it's replacing our compensation tools at the moment.
Okay. Well, that's
But
good to
let's
know.
take the second part of that, which is actually writing the letter.
Mhm.
And then to make sure that you aren't giving away any proprietary information, the easy way to do it is just not put the person's name and address in there.
Mhm.
Get the AI to ask the AI to write a letter and explain to it what you want in there. And it should be able to do that fairly easily. And then you can just take it and put it into Word. You will have to reformat it because
Mhm.
ChatGPT kicks out things in plain text. So you will have to reformat it. And then just add in the proprietary information then.
Would you be able to say, write this offer letter to a person who lives in Florida and be sure to include employment at will? Um,
Yes,
and
for
then it
sure.
would do that. And if I wrote it
Mhm.
for and if I asked it to write it for California, it would take in all the California regs?
Yes. Now, the one thing to be careful of
Hmm.
is that large language models like to do what you ask them to do. And why is that a problem? Because, hey, that's what you want, isn't it? Well, it is. But imagine you had a friend who was so eager to please you that they would actually tell you everything you wanted to hear, even if it wasn't correct.
Mm.
And that's called hallucinations in large language models. And they do that, right? So you can ask it to give you something and then it will try to please you. So you do have to go back and check to
Hmm.
make sure that if you, for instance, say make sure it complies with California regulations, you probably still need to go and look that up and just make sure. I would hope if you're an HR person who's looking after people in California, you probably have a good sense of that anyhow. In which case, it's probably okay because you can look at it and say, "Hey, that's fine," or "That doesn't quite smell right. Let me just look at that," and
Hmm.
then maybe you go to Sherm or somewhere like that and look for the just to make sure that it's right.
How do we know when we're in HR that we're ready for AI use?
Well, I think it can be used at any point. I mean, there's so many things it can help with already that you've hit on a couple: writing letters, writing responses to emails. I was using it to send out announcements out to my entire company. So, for instance, in my last role, where I was the head of HR for a healthcare company, the owner of the company, several times I needed to send out announcements to the whole of the employees on his behalf.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to try and make sure I wrote like him. And so I took some non-proprietary information documents that he'd written and stuck that into the AI and said, "Hey, I want to send an announcement out to the general population. This is what I want in it. This is the sort of the information that it needs to contain," and then write it in his voice. And it actually wrote something that was fantastic. I mean, just
Wow.
absolutely fantastic. And I sent it to him and he looked at it and he was like, "Wow, this is great. Yeah, send it out." So it was much easier than him having to go through and then kind of almost rewrite it
Hmm.
into his voice. So I think there's all sorts of ways you can use AI now
Hmm.
without a special tool, but there's some special tools out there which I think we're going to get into in a different episode, which will actually, take that to another level.
Yeah, as a former speechwriter, this scares the crap out of me. Wow. Wow, that's one of the things I always prided myself on was being able to find their voice and
Yeah.
be able to write in it. Wow, I had not
Well,
heard that at all.
so one of the things I do, I have Grammarly, which is
Uh
a
huh.
free grammar. Well, it can be a free grammar checker. I actually pay for the premium version of that, and every week it gives me an analysis of my writing style, if you
Mm-hmm.
like. So it says you write, 18% confident, and gives me this whole percentage breakdown. And then maybe not every week, but pretty much every other week, I'll take that and I'll chuck it into various AI tools that I use, and then it replicates my
Hmm.
voice.
Wow.
So, and other things as well. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm British, and so I write in British English. And so I told the AI that I write and output in British English, so it doesn't use all the Z's that Americans use, and it puts the U's in the proper places. So I get the content I want rather than having to go through and respell everything and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. Well, Bill, thanks for giving us this little primer on AI and the impact in HR. We are going to have a special episode to focus on some exciting product, an exciting product you have on
Hmm.
AiOnix
Yeah,
about HR usage that doesn't have some of those pitfalls that open
correct.
source has. So, thanks so
Yeah.
much for joining us, Bill.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's been great. Thank you.